When Christ is really present in the Eucharist, the Church becomes a horizontal event. No one, not even the cardinals who work closely with the Curia, thought the Vatican would say something like that. 5 minutes before noon in Rome time, the Holy See press office sent out a message that was so short and simple that many people thought it was a mistake. His Holiness Pope Leo I XIV has given His Eminence Robert Cardinal Sarah a brand new job in the Holy See. We will give you more information later. There is neither a title nor an explanation. There's not a news event. But in just 5 minutes, the Catholic world was on fire. It was known that Cardinal Sarah, the prelate born in Guinea, would fight hard for orthodoxy. The man who clearly and quietly did not agree with Pope Francis on many issues, ranging from church change to gender issues. Many people thought that this man had been pushed to the side during the last pope. He has now left to give talks in Paris and homilies in Dar. He wasn't told to be quiet anymore, he was called back. I'm not into retiring with a ceremony. But now we're going to do something new and busy. Sarah had been the leader of the Church's most traditional group for years. She was a hero to those who wanted Latin masses, teaching that didn't change, and theological clarity. He was also a lightning rod for progressive criticism. Some people said he was strict, left out, and nostalgic while pretending to be holy. Still, Pope Leo I XIV put him back on the job. Why? What could possibly drive a new pope, who is already known for being nice, reformist, and focused on including everyone, to seek out a man who is often seen as the exact opposite of him? Ideas spread very quickly. Was this an attempt to make the conservatives in the Church happy? Did Leo want to keep things in balance as Pope by including views from the global South? Or was there something more? This was a smart move that meant redefine instead of compromise. No matter what the answer is, one thing was certain. No longer was Cardinal Robert Sarah sent away. He came back. How about the part that Pope Leo made for him? It wasn't a title of honor. It wasn't a sign. It had to do with missions. While the rest of the world fights over theory and direction, Leo I XIV seems to remember what his predecessors often forgot. People who don't want to change can make the way forward. Now that Sarah is back, the Church will be known for its differences rather than its disagreements. For almost 10 years, Cardinal Robert Sarah stood for unwavering conviction, which was something the Vatican didn't quite get. In the years after Pope Benedict appointed Sarah, she rose quickly, all the way up to the early years of Pope Francis's reign. His African roots, artistic way of life, and strong religious background made him stand out in Rome, but they also turned out to be a problem in the end. As of 2021, he was no longer in charge of the Congregation for Divine Prayer and the Discipline of the Sacraments. The Vatican said he could no longer work because he was 75 years old, which is the retirement age for bishops and curial heads. Even so, everyone in the Curia knew it wasn't true. A former Vatican official said that he was pushed to the side. It is too clear, too strong, and too fixed to move. Sarah's disagreements with Francis's plans were never made public. He never yelled or scolded people in public. But his writing was sharp, poetic, and not sorry for what he said, so it was clear what he thought. He was against letting divorced and remarried people join the Church. He did not like how liturgical rules were becoming less strict, calling it spiritual deformity. Others said that priestly celibacy wasn't needed anymore, but he stood up for it. He warned over and over that the Church was losing its sense of what is holy in favor of what is important to society. Many people saw his 2019 book, The Day Is Now Far Spent, as a subtle attack on the direction the Vatican is taking. It was published in many languages and sold over 200,000 copies without getting a single recommendation from a present Vatican official. He changed into something of a ghost when he got to Rome. He was often seen praying quietly on his knees at masses while dressed in his red cassock. Throughout Europe and Africa, he gave talks. He went to areas that were on the edges. But the calls from different parts of the Vatican stopped. He wasn't asked to talk. A French manchier said that he wasn't asked to give advice. But when he spoke, the seats were full. Many people were looking forward to hearing what he had to say. Sarah never played the victim, though. He wouldn't say anything bad about Pope Francis by name in talks. When asked about being fired, he just smiled and said, "I serve wherever God puts me." This made some people think he was done. A piece of history, a relic, the last gasp of the Benedict XVI age. But some people knew better. A bishop of Senegal said that silence doesn't mean giving up. We know how important it is to wait here in Africa. We waited for him. While the church talked about synods and statements, Sarah did what he always did, prayed, read, served, and watched. He saw how Francis's last years were full of scandals, fights within the church, and a flock that was becoming more and more split. He saw as the voices on both sides got louder, more angry, and less ready to listen. He saw as young seminarians lost hope because of the uncertainty and went back to studying Latin in secret. Sarah was there when the doors to the meeting shut and Pope Francis died. Not running for office or fishing, just being there. Some people thought he had no chance of becoming pope. He was also too controversial and rigid. That might not have been his job, though, because a few weeks later, under a new pope, the impossible happened. The phone went off. It came in quietly. There was no group or statement. It's just a call. The phone rang at Cardinal Robert Sarah's simple home on the outskirts of Rome, where he had been living since he retired. A small stone house with African symbols, well-read religious books, and the silence of a man who had given up on getting much out of phone calls from the Vatican. But it rang that morning. He replied. On the other side, Pope Leo I was 14th. The voice answered, "Robert." It was quiet and familiar. "Let's talk." There was a 43-minute call. Sources say that this wasn't a demand or an order. It was an answer. Pope Leo is said to have said, "I have been listening to the Church. I also think we can't build unity if we don't include those who felt left out." At first, Sarah didn't say anything. He didn't believe them. The man knew a lot about politics. Men would cheer one year and then erase the next. That wasn't nice, though. This was clear and honest. The new pope praised Sarah's courage, clarity, and most of all, his message. "You stood your ground," Leo XIV told him. "I need you to walk with me next time, not in the past," he said. Sarah was shocked. Many saw this pope as a bridger, or moderate reformer, who was raised in the spirit of Francis and was very aware of the growing split in the church. Why talk to the man who is most linked to the other side? That's when Leo made it clear. He told her, "I'm not trying to shut you up. As a servant, I want you to be yourself." Then the offer came, not to go back to dull oversight or be stuck in an advisory role, but to lead a new office that focuses on global renewal instead of internal red tape. Sarah asked for some time to pray. He said he didn't expect anything less, Leo. Sarah did the same things he always did for 5 days. She went to Mass by herself, read the Bible, and walked in the yard outside his house. He didn't talk to any news crews. We didn't do any interviews. But people who knew him well say they saw something in his face that they hadn't seen in years. Peace. He didn't change because the Pope didn't tell him to. He wanted him to serve again, but this time on a task that felt more like a calling than a job. After 5 days, Cardinal Sarah agreed. It happened with just one line, "I've never sought titles, but if this helps the Church, I will walk." The angry theologian, the controversial cardinal, and the so-called exile, was now quietly getting ready for a job that would take him further than any curia office had ever gone into a church that was in need of someone to show it what belief looks like when it's wrapped in humility. When the Vatican finally put out the full statement, it wasn't full of confusing jargon or vague language. It was brave, clear, and new for many people in Rome. Robert Cardinal Sarah is named Special Papal Envoy to the Global South by His Holiness Pope Leo I XIV. His job is to strengthen ties between traditional Catholic communities and the main goal of unity, evangelization, and doctrinal fidelity. The job had never been filled before. There wasn't a predecessor, author, or guidebook. It was made just for Sarah by Pope Leo I XIV. Within hours, Vatican reporters were rushing to figure out what it meant. Is it just a show of goodwill, a peace branch to the conservatives, or is there more to it than that? Because the title seemed like something extra, but people who worked there said that the power it gave was very real. Sarah refused to tell the Secretary of State what was going on. He would tell the Pope everything. The following were part of his job description. Taking part in episcopal talks on behalf of the Vatican in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Giving advice to bishops' conferences on how liturgical practice and modern pastoral care are related. Serving as a liaison for areas dealing with growing secularism, persecution, and internal division. Most importantly, traditional Catholic communities that have been left out of the Church's world mission need to be brought back in. To put it simply, Cardinal Sarah was not living in a museum. He was sent to fight on the front lines. It was a surprise to everyone. The move shocked and even confused people in the Curia. Few people were skeptical, though. One Vatican official was said to have said, "It's as if the Pope reached into the past to build the future." As he read the note, a young Nigerian priest who works in the group for bishops smiled. He said, "This is not politics. It's about you." For Leo, he knows where faith is growing and that Sarah talks the language of growth. In fact, the numbers don't lie. Africa and Southeast Asia, especially Sub-Saharan Africa, have seen the fastest rise of Catholicism in the world over the last 20 years. Instead of marketing efforts, martyrs, missionaries, and movements are what are making the Church grow there. Still, a lot of people in these areas feel cut off from Rome because of arguments about gender, codality, and liturgical experimentation that are centered on the West. Sarah is a unique mix of African spirituality and Roman orthodoxy. She has unshakable faith and knows all about the suffering Church. Outside of Europe, people responded right away. The bells rang at the St. Charles Langa Cathedral in Kinshasa. The seminarians in Cebu told everyone about Sarah's quote, "The West is dying because it has forgotten how to kneel." Even people who didn't like Sarah noticed. In a blog post, a Jesuit theologian who had a disagreement with him at a liturgical conference said, "Whether you admire or oppose him, you must now deal with him." The Pope chose engagement over exile. That explains everything. Sarah accepted the job in a short letter when she got back to Rome. "There's no big deal. It's just these words, I'll go wherever the Church sends me, and I will not speak of ideology, but of the gospel." This means that the man who was once seen as too rigid for modern Catholicism was sent not to defend the past, but to walk ahead of it. The Vatican is used to internal tremors, but Cardinal Robert Sarah's return has sent such clear and divisive shock waves through its halls in recent years. Some people think it was Pope Leo I XIV's first mistake as Pope, while others thought it was his bravest move yet. There were waves of surprise, skepticism, and then a growing realization that this was more than just a gesture, it was a plan. The dicastery for the doctrine of the faith got mixed reactions. A high-level figure with ties to Francis's government is said to have sighed and said, "This man wanted to bring back the Latin Mass everywhere. Are we giving him more power now?" But a lower official speaking in the background said that wasn't the point. It was about giving half of the Church a voice that wouldn't destroy the house, not providing him with more power. As it turned out, Sarah wasn't in charge of a curial department, liturgy, or doctrine. Instead, Pope Leo I XIV gave him something more dangerous, a voice and a mission outside of the bureaucracy. The Vatican press corps coverage was just as divided. Progressive Catholic publications ran opinion pieces warning of the return of hardliners and the rise of restorationism. Others were happy about it, with headlines like, "The Return of Rigor." On Catholic Twitter, the most popular picture showed Pope Leo I XIV in white, smiling softly, and Cardinal Sarah in red, eyes lowered, holding a breviary. The caption said, "There are two pillars, one church." Some people who follow the Vatican thought this would lead to a new ideological battle, this time between Leo and Sarah instead of Francis and Benedict. But people who work for the Curia say Leo expected and even welcomed the tension. "He's not building camps," one worker said, "he's building corridors between voices that had forgotten how to communicate with each other." In fact, the Pope is said to have told one of his advisors, "If you silence every voice that questions you, you will end up alone, and alone is not a place for Peter's successor." And Cardinal Sarah, he made no disparaging remarks. There is no press conference. When asked by a journalist whether he saw his role as a comeback, he responded, "This is not a return. I've never left. I was just praying." Even people who didn't like him were surprised by how strong but not angry he sounded. This was because Sarah would not be brought back to fight, even though he had previously disagreed with Francis's plans. He was brought back as a witness. And in a Vatican that is more used to cautious messaging and subtle moves, Leo's clear action said more than any encyclical: the Church cannot be whole if it cuts off its prophets. It wasn't in Rome, but in Nairobi, at the Archbishop's home for a short press conference. A long table with a few microphones, no velvet curtains or gold-trimmed thrones, and Cardinal Robert Sarah, who sat there in silence until the cameras stopped rolling. He didn't wear glasses or a political grin, all that was on his face was a red mozzetta and a rosary around his neck. Then he spoke, but not with fire but with finality: "I serve. I don't seek." With those 6 words, Cardinal Sarah shut down a whole news cycle. There was no talk of conflict, rival groups, or liturgical wars. When asked directly about his past disagreements with Vatican leadership, Sarah said, "I'm not here to debate history." He said, "I'm here to bring Christ to the poor, the broken, and the faithful who feel forgotten." He also confirmed his new title as Special Papal Envoy to the Global South and talked about his upcoming trips to Burkina Faso, Colombia, the Philippines, South Sudan, and Europe to listen, not teach. But the truly memorable moment came when a Kenyan reporter asked him, "What is your message to Catholics who are torn between tradition and change?" Sarah didn't move. Truth doesn't change, but each generation needs a different way to reach their hearts. Some people call me rigid, but I like to think of myself as rooted. I don't mind change that comes from prayer, but I'm afraid of change that comes from panic. Another reporter asked him what he thought about the rumors that he was Leo IV checkmate move to appease the conservative base. Sarah smiled slowly and steadily back. "A bishop isn't just a piece on the board, he serves souls." He thanked the Pope for trusting him and his African brothers and sisters for their testimony. And he ended with words that were heard all over the world: "We aren't supposed to be left or right, we are supposed to be holy. I don't speak or walk to get praise or power, I go where the shepherd sends me, to find the sheep who have given up hope that anyone is coming." He stood up, refused to shake hands, and walked out on his own, without the press following him. Cardinal Sarah had come back, not to take back a platform, but to lift a cross. Let the world love him or hate him. In Rome, it's called a master stroke, not because it was flashy or unexpected, but because it changed everything without firing a shot. When Pope Leo XIV named Cardinal Sarah as Special Envoy to the Global South, he didn't just bring a dead prelate back to life, he changed how the Church works. Over the past 10 years, Catholicism has been stuck in a false choice: you are either Francis or Benedict, modern or traditional, caring or rigid. But Pope Leo has now said, no, you can be both. You need to be both. For this Church to get better, the opinions that used to be on opposite sides of the aisle must now speak with one voice. When Leo XIV sent Cardinal Sarah to serve in the mission fields instead of Rome, he did something very different. He gave tradition a job instead of a throne. He didn't make Sarah the guardian of liturgy or doctrine, and he didn't use him against progressives. Instead, he sent him to where the Church is growing the fastest and breaking the deepest, telling him to bring people together instead of letting them down. Francis showed the world compassion, and Benedict stood up for what was right. Leo is trying to marry them, and Sarah has now joined the union. This does not mean that the Church is no longer divided, it is not a magical healing. But it is a sign from the very top that the old walls are falling down. Instead of tearing them down, he invites both builders and critics to work together to rebuild. For a church that has been hit hard by scandal, ideology, and loss, that message may be the first sign of something it hasn't felt in years: hope. Because if Cardinal Robert Sarah can find his place again, not in opposition but in mission, then maybe the church can too.